staying present at all times. The Kundalini looks for, no matter what the circumstances are, you staying present. The last piece of what she looks for is breath. So, if my mind is rampant, and I breathe in through my nostrils and bringing it right into my body and dropping and just keep breathing. It's almost like the hose that you hose a garden with, for instance, is full blast. Imagine you are turning that hose on half of its capacity. Eventually, that hose is not half of its capacity. It now becomes a third, and then it becomes a quarter. Even though it appears that the breathing is very shallow, the breathing is actually not shallow at all. But it literally feels like if you have a wound and you just blow upon it, you can feel the breath so acutely because there's a wound. You can just feel this all over. If your skin is healed and you go, you don't have the same sensitivity. Well, breath is very interesting because when a breath is just a breath, it does nothing. When a breath becomes conscious, meaning that you are purposely, actively turning a breath that normally is of an unconscious nature, and you turn that breath into a conscious breath, and that breath is not a full breath, but it is a quarter of a breath, and you bring it in so almost like Om Namo Va. It's the same thing, the same as I chant it. And I bring that mantra, that breath, and if you watch where I chant and where my breath drops and where I move my voice around, the same thing with the breath. So if my mind goes in its own direction, I cannot battle it, but I can certainly breathe and take in that breath and bring the breath right to the crown. And as it brings to the crown, I bring it up, I bring it up, I bring it up, I bring it up, and I release it. And the breath drops all the way down. That breath then drops at the bottom of the Sushumna. It follows all the way down. When we can do that in a very shallow, it's not shallow, but in a very sophisticated or conscious manner, is probably the right terminology. In a very conscious, and we do this sporadically, the mind cools right down. Now this is where the biggest piece comes in. The heart requires you to breathe consciously. The heart is looking for compassion, love, empathy. It looks for all these qualities. But the Kundalini and the heart is also looking that when an event or when something happens of great love, that you can stand in the moment and be completely present and breathe in, all the way in, and you hold that breath, comes and your whole cavity of your chest expands almost in such ease magnitude. If you take a breath that is unconscious and you go like this whole cavity of your chest is restricted. Your whole breath in your throat, the entire breath that goes to the crown is completely constricted. When you breathe, where you are making an unconscious breath conscious in the moment, and you breathe that in, the body and the cavity of the body opens up and it allows you to move that breath all the way in. So this cavity in your chest, but even though the energy, you're really holding it in this part of the body, you're actually also experiencing that the entire cavity from the heart chakra all the way here and all the way up, all of a sudden your chest expands in a way that you normally don't experience, because if you took a breath that is an unconscious breath, you could not take that kind of breath. So, when something profound happens, and you have the innate ability to not only be completely present, and have the compassion, have that empathy, have that love, while simultaneously bring in that breath into your body, and then suspend it, and then let it drop, that breath brings you greater liberation than anything you can imagine. The Kundalini showers you with grace and insight and resolution and freedom beyond the comprehension of the mind. She also looks for the same breath when something challenging comes your way. So when you are in a moment that is incredibly challenging, and you're needing to remain compassionate and empathetic, and you can move yourself moving into that conscious heart, into that conscious breath, and bring the breath up while simultaneously feeling that the breath is opening up the cavity of the heart chakra and the upper chest, and you can hold that while releasing it gradually, that breath moves you out of that type of karma into a reaction, self-imprisonment. No matter what it might be, it liberates you. It's like a bucket of consciousness that ends up in your spiritual bank of consciousness. That single breath, if you literally look, when I take that breath, like my body, now my body, I hold it there, and my whole back releases. So what happens, I take in the breath, and this opens up, and then I breathe even deeper, and my back curves just a little bit, where the entire expansion of my back. Now, the person in front of you will never even know. But what happens, that breath is that breath that translates, that breath becomes pure love. That breath becomes compassion. That breath becomes your liberation. That breath, when it is done well, when you learn to do this from the right place, your entire relationships, your entire way of life begins to change. What you'll find is when you listen to a piece of music that is so delightful, and you take that breath, you almost feel like the music has just traveled right through you at the same time. That breath is what it is needed for the heart to open its doorways.